Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you, and I think we just have a wonderful program for you. Certainly one of my favorites. You know, we have talked to a lot of people over the 10 years with Smithsonian Associates, and today is a special one. Some people change history with speeches. Others change it with power. Rachel Carson changed it with attention. She taught us that wonder is not a luxury. It's the beginning of wisdom, that the natural world is not something apart from us, but something to which we belong. And in an age racing toward the future, with everything going on, Rachel Carson asked us to pause long enough to truly see. It often begins with a quiet voice, not loud, not angry, not looking for a fight, but clear, certain, and impossible to ignore. At a time when America was celebrating progress, just as we are today, it was celebrating chemical innovation, modern convenience, a future that seemed brighter and easier than ever. One woman asked a simple, unsettling question. What are we not seeing? Rachel Carson wasn't trying to become a public figure. She was a writer, a scientist, a careful observer of tides, birds, wind, and water, a woman who believed that if we paid close enough attention, nature would tell us everything we needed to know. And people listened, first to her wonder, and then to her warning. Because when Silent Spring was published, it didn't just challenge policy, it challenged assumptions. It asked Americans to rethink progress, responsibility, and the cost of convenience. But here's what often gets missed and what makes today's conversation so meaningful. Rachel Carson's story isn't only about alarm, it's about attention, it's about curiosity. It's about living a life that stays engaged, observant, and purposeful right up to the very end. I think that's what so many of us in the Not Old Better Show embrace. This conversation, this is going to meet all of us. Today, Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson joins us to bring Rachel Carson's full story into focus. The science, the writing, the courage, and the deep sense of wonder that still speaks to how we live today. And yes, maybe even how we chose to live better. I'm your host, Paul Vogelzang. This is the Smithsonian Associates interview series on the Not Old Better Show, radio and podcast. Stay with us as we have a wonderful conversation today with Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson. Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson is our guest today. Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we get to talk about so many great things with Smithsonian Associates, and I have to tell you selfishly, I am excited to talk to you today about Rachel Carson, your expertise. Of course, you run the wonderful Spring Song Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland. We're going to talk all about Rachel Carson, really as this wonderful soul, the mother of modern the environmental movement. So I want to just jump right in and talk to you for the perspective of kind of my older age audience, because I think Rachel Carson's often remembered just for Silent Spring, perhaps. But in my research of you, you really make the case that her full body of work matters as much as that, if not more. What is it that we miss, I think, in my age group? What do we miss about Rachel Carson and even about ourselves when we don't learn the full extent of what she's done and who she is and her legacy?
Yeah, well, I think it ties back to that question of, or that kind of moniker of being the mother of the modern environmental movement. And you hear that and wonder, well, how did that happen? And how did she become the mother of the modern environmental movement? And then you quickly get to Silent Spring, and you understand, maybe the impact of Silent Spring, but then you ask why again. Why did Silent Spring have that kind of impact? And a lot of it, was of course, the timing in various ways, but on Rachel's side, so much of it had to do with her career leading up to Silent Spring, this incredibly successful career that she built that really enamored an entire country with her writing and gave this, that trusted her, a readership that trusted Rachel and loved her writing enough to read a book mostly about synthetic pesticides, when that wasn't something that was an easy read at the time, but Rachel knew that a lot of people had been having these questions about, the rapid pace of change in technology and, in particular around chemicals. But they were, as she said in the book, fed little pills, tranquilizing pills of half truths, which is such a great line. But she knew, and she wanted to give some actual evidence, some data, some research to those questions that we all still have of, who's really in charge here? Are we going down the right path? And she was able to do that. But again, it was because of the career that she had before that, or that she, was still as a writer. The books that she'd written, the civil service job that she had before that, that really allowed her to learn how to effectively communicate with the public about some pretty big topics. And so there's a lot of uh, asking questions that at least I wanted to understand, the why of how someone like that could be called a mother of the environmental movement, especially when she was not what we would think of as an activist. She didn't launch a campaign, so to speak. She was truth telling through her writing and bringing people along, but also, giving the readers respect to make their own maybe conclusions about their own actions. But that's a different kind of activist than we think of today. And I just found that very intriguing. But her full career, really starting as a teenager, writing about the woods around her house in Pennsylvania, and her walks with her dog there to see the birds and hear the birds. That is a direct line to Silent Spring. There's even though to us as readers it seems like a completely different um, type of writing, as a different subject, talking about synthetic pesticides. For her, it was a career spent um, being in love with the natural world and helping others to feel that way. And so there's a direct connection then from all of that work to a book like Silent Spring.
Yeah, it's interesting that you do reference her work before we really knew her, and she had such an impact. I think it always struck me, and certainly in my research and preparation for today, this idea of moral courage really just jumps out. And this career that she had prior to her work and writing on Silent Spring wasn't really something that you would attribute necessarily to being morally courageous. Maybe it was, but I mean, she had some interesting roles that she played. She was a scientist, as you say, she was a writer, but she was importantly a caregiver. She was a breadwinner in her family, a very, important responsibility there. How do you think some of those everyday responsibilities shaped who she was, and just gave her this sense of authority and uh, and this great empathy that she had to her voice?
Yes, I mean, she had a life not unlike many people growing up. She was
Mhm.
born in 1907, and lived through lots of dark times in the country's history. There was the flu, there was the Depression, wars, all sorts of things that touched her in different ways. But her family itself, her parents and siblings, were never on firm financial footing. And she, from a young age in her teens, when she started winning these awards from St. Nicholas Magazine for her essays that she was submitting, those came with funds, with small amounts of money, and she very quickly realized that she can support her family, or at least contribute in a very meaningful way, by being a writer. And that is the way that she contributed for the rest of her life to her family. When she moves to Baltimore as a young 20 something to go to graduate school, her entire family moves in with her not long after, before that year is over. And she lists 5 dependents very soon after her parents and sister and nieces. And so there's never a moment when she isn't participating in that ecology of her family. That it is she is a part of it. They're a part of her. As you said, the development of empathy, seeing some very sad things happen personally with her family, with deaths and illness and failures, quote unquote failures, financially, uh, and the resilience that they had kind of as a unit, um, partially because she was able to be that breadwinner, is something that remained with her and as a major part of her life until the day she died. Uh, and I would say that 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 is something that really factors into the why of her work all along. So not just, well, there's definitely the why that she was writing articles for the Baltimore Sun, and eventually, becoming the editor in chief of for Fish and Wildlife Service, and that clearly brought some financial stability to the family that Rachel, had sought. But she also, all along the way, the writing that she's doing, especially the writing for Baltimore Sun and the Atlantic Monthly and others, and then her books themselves, are also cognizant and really responding to a world where there is uncertainty and pain and disappointment and failures. And all along, her hope in that writing is that message, the way that she's sharing her perspective on the world, um, can be a gift to people and can help them to feel an element of strength and stability, even when their daily lives might feel otherwise. So that grounding that she did, I think, was likely the grounding that she kind of gave to people through her writing about the our place in the world, our place in this living world. Um, I think that need to connect with people in that way and perhaps help them did partially come from a life where she did see people suffering or not living life to the in the way that they had wanted.
Thank you for that. I also really came to this conclusion that her hope really for all of us never diminished in any way. And you, through your work at Spring Song Museum, we'll talk about that in just a moment too. But I I really found that you're speaking about Rachel Carson, you're writing about Rachel Carson. You really often touch about her sense of wonder for that which is around us. And in a world where all of us are moving so fast, why is it important for us to slow down a little bit, especially as we get a little bit older, and pay some close attention to a bird song or to the shoreline rhythms there around Chesapeake Bay and some of those really beautiful areas and the seasons around us, all of these things that you write about, you talk about with regard to Rachel Carson, but that she really espoused. She was just all about that kind of that pace.
Exactly, and it's present in every piece of her writing. Is that context, that bigger picture of those eternal cycles and the ancient rhythms of life on Earth, and Um, I she didn't use the words mental health or, that was a benefit to to be out in nature from a mental health perspective like we might today. Um, but she knew it. She could feel it. She felt, um, that ability to still oneself and observe and absorb what's around oneself when you're in, by a brook or, on the shore or really, I mean, she would say too, just watching a seed grow in your kitchen windowsill, um, that ability to still oneself and to get outside of oneself, outside of one's head and notice all of the marvelous things that are happening. At any given moment can really have benefit. And so there wasn't a lot of research like there is now about the benefits of being in nature, but she was onto it and she believed it to her core. There were letters upon letters that she would receive um, for with regard to any of her books that were written, but really The Sea Around Us, which was the book that really made her a household name. It was published in 1951 and was essentially, taking on the topic of the oceans as a whole, the natural history of the oceans and life within the waters. And um, the letters that she received were that she would talk about in her speeches were often about how people were changed by reading this book, that their eyes were open. They felt um, so grateful to be part of this marvelous world. And there was even one where she mentioned a man talking about putting down the bottle because he had felt so awakened by what she was writing about. And so here, this ability that any of us has to step outside or even just look through a window and feel that instant sense of connection. It was free and moderately easy. At least it should be somewhat easy to do. And so that was really the hope that she had in writing that. And I think as we get older too, just, she talks about us as human beings, that our origins are of the earth, and that's a beautiful thing, and that we are part of something that, continues long after we are gone, and uh, that it's this continuous cycle. She calls it material immortality, that um, the parts of us, will continue on in different ways and different elements of life, and that it is this essentially never-ending story of life on Earth, which is, something that she talks about in her 50s when she does have breast cancer and other ailments, and I think it helps her to manage some of the pain and also just the moral kind of distress at that time. But I will say too, she really in the magazine article that she writes while living in Silver Spring in 1956, "Help Your Child to Wonder." She talks about intergenerational experiences in nature, and that's really core to what she's getting at, and that we can all, no matter our age, learn from someone of a different age, especially, we adults. The perspective of children is so fresh and um, so energetic, and but really clear-eyed, and that's what she was hoping that adults could get back to, while also nurturing with any children around us, nurturing that sense of wonder that children innately have. And it can be something as simple as, uh, if a child exclaims, "Look at the leaf," dancing in the air or falling, and just having a moment of saying "wow" with that child or looking at what the child's pointing at. She said we didn't need to be experts at anything in with the natural world, but just sharing that sense of wonder and awe can nurture a child's interest in nature, and and of course that helps us too as adults to feel that. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. I certainly, that was not lost on me that she had this real gift for making science so accessible, feel so intimate, and was able to really reach across generations and include this kind of very, at the time, a unique kind of method of connecting facts with feelings. And I thought that was something that, as you were talking, I was thinking about, well, children, of course, they need almost those feelings. They can digest the facts, but the feelings are something that they have, and certainly aren't even diminished. And so I wonder how do we do more of that? Certainly as a communicator, and you serve in that role, I know too. How do we, perhaps me, maybe more than you, but how do I do a better job at kind of communicating some of these wonderful things about Rachel Carson so that I don't lose sight of the science, but still make it very feeling based?
yeah, I think just remembering, just like you said, I mean, it's throughout her writing. And it's also it can be a focus of her writing. Like in this article, the senses she urges us to drink in, the beauty and the wonder, and this um, the sounds of the birds. I mean, that's something alone that compelled her to have that moral courage that you were talking about, but that sonic reminder that life is continuing outside of our windows, those the beautiful bird songs. Um, I think if we if we ourselves, you and I, do practice that more of, that we are so um, w- as adults, we're steered to focus on the facts, um, and even when we're thinking of science or climate change, we're supposed to be, listening to the science, respecting the facts, and we do. But that can be a very uh, depressing, and I do think it can lead to some burnout too when you don't have that enriching love for the natural world that just is nonstop curiosity, and that really just allowing oneself to marvel again, to revere things, to have these big emotions about the most ordinary things outside of our window. I think the more of us that can act in that way, and even commenting, we think talking about the weather is um, such a empty topic, but it grounds us, like you were saying before, the talking about the seasons. It's all putting us back into reality, showing that our eyes are open to these miraculous changes that are occurring, that occur every year, and tying us to that, that earthly um, rhythm that she loves to talk about. But I think it does start with us. I think it's something I've seen with my two boys. Um, Watching them uh, absorb the natural world and kind of lose themselves in it, lose any anxiety that they might be feeling in that moment or anything else, and just being in the natural world. Um, I think when we as adults see that and can encourage it, then it becomes contagious for us too, and then we never stop, wondering and marveling, and that is, yeah, just coming back to that question of moral courage that she had. That is um, certainly something that many of us were attracted to. I think first when learning about Carson and what she did, writing a book that she didn't want to write at the end of her life. She didn't want to write Silent Spring, but she felt compelled to do this for people, for the benefit of the birds and the natural world that sustained her during her entire life. So she felt sustained by the birds and the wonders of the world, and that helped her to have that moral courage when it was needed. So she was, very much giving back directly to, or maybe indirectly, but to what she was feeling grateful for, that was there for her throughout her life.
Just ahead, don't go anywhere, because what Rachel Carson discovered and had the courage to say out loud didn't just change science. It changed how we see our place in the living Word. And here's the part that still stops you. She wasn't finished, not even close. There was more she wanted to write, more she hoped we'd understand, and perhaps most important, more she believed we were capable of becoming. When we come back, Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson rejoins us. She helps us hear not just Rachel Carson's warning, but her hope, and why her voice may matter even more right now. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Our guest today is Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson. Rebecca Henson is the founder and director for Spring Song Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland. I want to talk a little bit about that with you too, Rebecca, but I want to get back to our discussion of kind of this idea that Rachel Carson had almost a sense of foreboding when it came to technology and when it came to some of the things that we're dealing with in such a direct, almost overwhelming way today. I found this quote from Rachel Carson on your website. I just loved it. Rachel Carson says, "The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction." And so Rachel Carson warned us of some of these things, not to embrace technology too readily, and perhaps the long-term effects on the ecosystem around us. And so as you look today about the debates swirling on land use, climate, public health, where is it that you hear Rachel Carson's voice speaking most clearly to us right now?
Great question, and that's actually a quote that I was thinking of when you started speaking about.
I love that quote. Yeah, I found that it just jumped out at me immediately. It's from, we'll put links so their audience can find it too, but it's right at Spring Song Museum. And of course, you're the director there and founder. So congratulations on that work.
Oh, thank you. And yes, it's certainly a work in progress. There's no uh, large scale exhibit, permanent exhibit, or museum for Rachel in the world. So this is our mission to create and open the Spring Song Museum in 2 years. So we've been at it for about 5 years now, and
Wonderful. Well, we'll help. We'll put some information out there too
thank
for
you.
all of our
Yeah.
Smithsonian audience.
But the quote that you bring up is perfect because when when we first hear that quote, we understand it from an intuitive perspective that is right. Um, and I at least tended to focus on the wonders part of it, the beauty of creation, maybe. But the more and more I read of Rachel, she's also helping us to see clearly and to see the realities and to not be disconnected from reality, from and the most real things that we have are the earth around us, the physical realities of our world. Um, and so I do think that she would be concerned about the acceptance, especially of AI. I hear her voice sometimes, or at least her warnings, and some of the pushback that we're now starting to hear with not even the acceptance of AI, but what she would see as a blind acceptance, and something that is not in the interest of all of us. And part of that it is just so disconnected from those rhythms of the earth, of those truths that human beings have evolved uh, to live within. those sources of strength that come from wondering at those realities. And uh, a lot of that is lost in something as um, topsy-turvy producing as AI. And so I do think even perhaps more so than microplastics and other purely environmental concerns that there are today, it's the acceptance of AI. It's very similar to in the 1940s with the rapid acceptance of DDT and other synthetic pesticides, um, which were miraculous chemicals and products, but the way that we were using them, where we really are uh, deferring to others to do the thinking and wondering for us, and especially when it is a major company, a major corporation, a chemical company who exists to produce and sell these chemicals. That's not exactly who we should be ceding our intellect to. And it's the same with AI. It's, their interests are not in the uh, the kind of strength and health of humanity, at least not in any really defensible way. And that's what she wanted us to question. Not all the time, you do leaving that room for wonder and for appreciation and reverence is needed as well. But um, as a society, to go down a path without much investigation is what really worried her, and how quickly that could happen. Um, she was also in the Washington area at a time of a lot of development. She was here a little bit before that in the 30s, but during the war and then post-war, the places that she came to love, parts of Rock Creek Park, the C&O Canal, other parts of this region, she saw, sometimes change overnight. And so she was recognizing just how quickly and irreversible some of our decisions can be. Just thinking of land use now and the data centers that are being created, it's almost unbelievable. And I think it would be that even that type of development would be unrecognizable for someone like Rachel Carson.
Rebecca Henson, Smithsonian Associates, our guest. We will have links so that our audience can find out all about Springsong Museum. Rebecca is the founder and director there. You'll find lots of great information about Rachel Carson. We will have links so that our audience can find out directly the information about Rebecca's upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. Thanks for all that you do. Congratulations, Rebecca. We would love to have you come back and talk more about Rachel Carson. This has just been fascinating, and I just think the more that we can understand her work and who she is, I think the better. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Paul.
And that is our conversation with Smithsonian Associate Rebecca Henson. What a remarkable return to Rachel Carson's voice, her vision, and that steady call to pay attention. Rachel Carson didn't ask us to be perfect. She asked us to notice, to listen more closely, to question what we accept too easily, and to remember that even the smallest acts of care, watching a shoreline, protecting a patch of land, sharing a sense of wonder with a child or a grandchild, those things truly matter. They always have. For many of us in the Not Old Better show, this stage of life brings a sharper lens. We've seen change, absolutely. We've lived through it. And maybe now, like Rachel Carson, we feel the quiet pull to leave something meaningful behind, not just ourselves and not just for ourselves, but for those who follow. In today's conversation, we talked about some wonderful elements of Rachel Carson's life. If our conversation today sparks something in you, stay with it. Step outside. Revisit a place you love. Share that curiosity with someone younger. That's where Rachel Carson's legacy lives, not just in books, but in what we choose to notice and protect each day. You can hear this episode again, along with our full library of Smithsonian Associate Conversations at notold-better.com. Join us on social media. That's Twitter at notoldbetter and Instagram at notoldbetter. We'd love to hear what this episode has meant to you. The Not Old Better Show is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm your host, Paul Vogelsang. Thanks for listening. Be well. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Please join me again next time. Thanks, everybody.